This is me, junior in college, living at home because tuition and rent and the cosmic joke called adulthood. I'm the person in my family who has always been the default, the one who notices things, organizes things, fixes things, and, crucially for this story, watches the kids. I say watches because the polite verb hides the reality. I've been raising other people's toddlers for most of my adult life, unpaid, unpraised, and slowly exsanguinated of free time. A little family context, so this reads less like a rant and more like confession. My parents, Helen and Mark, are in their late 50s, work steady jobs, and love me in that blunt, assumed way parents often do. They aren't malicious. They're tired. Really tired. Tired enough that "we're too tired to raise them" became a family meme and then a policy. My older sister Violet is 30, divorced, the mother of twins, and lives a half hour away. She has custody 80% of the time, when she wants it. She is charming, bright, and for reasons that made sense 5 years ago and make less sense now, very, very dramatic when it helps her make a point. She gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, 3 years ago. And ever since, there's been a gravitational pull toward me that no one can explain except Violet's go-to line. They just gravitate to Amber. It's not my fault. That line started as a joke and then hardened into policy. If someone in the family needed something done, grocery pickup, tax form, moral support when a plant died, they'd call me. If someone needed childcare, they'd call me. If someone needed the full-time, unending logistics of keeping small humans alive for hours at a time, they would call me, and I would do it. I did it because they're my family, because I love my nieces and nephew as much as I love anyone in the world. They melt me, they really do, and because I was used to picking up slack. Also, I was in college. Scheduling was supposedly easier then. Turns out, easier was a fantasy and a trap. I'll give some concrete examples, because these aren't isolated incidents. They're a pattern. Sophomore year, I had a lab final scheduled at 9 a.m. that I'd studied for all week. On the morning of the exam, Violet texted at 7:02 a.m. "Running late to work? Can you take the twins?" I'd already paid for the exam slot and had prepped. I called her. She said she couldn't afford a sitter for the day and that our parents were not home. I missed the first half of my final helping feed 2 sugar-high toddlers waffles and keeping them from jamming Cheerios into outlet sockets. The professor was kind and let me take the makeup early, but I lost 2 letter grade points for late arrival. Violet's response? "You're exaggerating. You always make a huge deal out of nothing." Junior year, I had a part-time job at a cafe. One afternoon, my manager called wondering why I didn't show up for a closing shift. I'd been meant to be there, but Violet texted, "Last-minute presentation. Twins at your house?" And then didn't pick up her phone for 3 hours. My manager replaced me for the night, and I lost shifts. My paycheck that month was $120 lighter. I told Violet. She offered to Venmo me $20 the next week and said, "You always make money decisions about babysitting like it's a job." My parents shrugged and nodded in the background as if this were the natural order of things. There are emotional examples too. The invisible labor that accumulates like dust. I'll wash the dishes, fold the toddlers' tiny clothes because their basins are overflowing at my house. And then Violet will pop in, kiss a cheek, and say, "You're a hero." It's performative gratitude that erases the weeks I spent rearranging my life. When I tried to set boundaries, gentle, careful ones, I got a combination of condescension and guilt. "Amber," my mother would say with that weary final tone that translates to, "Shut up and do the thing. Your sister needs help." My father would add, "They're family. Families help," which is a sentence that sounds noble until it's used to weaponize you into doing the heavy lifting because you are the most obliging. Let me be direct about the things that are at stake here, because nobody listens to vague complaints. I'm paying for school with loans and scholarships and a part-time job. My GPA is not just a number. It's a ticket to internships and the possibility of leaving this town and building a life that's mine. When I miss exams, shifts, or networking opportunities, because the default adult is out living her life while leaving me to babysit, that ticket gets punched. My mental health is at stake. I have literally cried in the laundry room at midnight because I couldn't find time to study while soothing a screaming infant. My social life is at stake. I haven't been on a proper date in 2 years, and my friends refuse to plan anything that requires a confirmed evening because they know Violet might call and ask, "Can Amber watch them?" Their answer is always, "Ask Amber." Like I'm the first phone number in the family directory next to emergency. Now, to be fair, this family dynamic has complexity. Violet had a messy divorce. She works 2 jobs some months and is often emotionally raw. She signs custody agreements that look generous on paper and then treats them like suggestions. I see her trying. Sometimes she's overwhelmed without malice. Sometimes she gets in over her head. I still genuinely love her. But trying doesn't mean I should become the unpaid default parent. Trying does not absolve someone from the consequences of repeated foreseeable behavior. There were manipulations that, to be honest, I didn't even recognize at first because they were so well practiced. They love you more. Translation, you're the soft target. You don't have anything else going on. Translation, your time is less valuable. It's just for a few hours. Translation, those hours will multiply like rabbits when left to their own devices. We're so tired. Translation, perform caretaking as penance. When I tried reasoning, I got answers that wrapped guilt in logic. You're still living here. Amber, we already support you. It only makes sense that you babysit. Support does not equal indentured servitude. Support does not require me to redo my entire academic calendar whenever someone's life choices demand a last-minute replacement. And if I pointed that out, I was lectured on family solidarity like I was the child who didn't understand sacrifice. I tried negotiation a few times. Naive, beautiful attempts. Can we split childcare costs? I suggested once, thinking money would make the arrangement feel fairer. Violet texted back an hour later, "I'll make it up by taking them over the weekend." She didn't. She'd show up late and leave early to run errands while I watched the kids. "Can we set a schedule?" I asked. Then Violet would call in emergencies, arguments with her ex, sudden overtime, and the schedule would collapse. "Can I have a break?" I whispered once, exhausted. My mother said, "You get a break when you move out," and left it at that. One of the worst parts is how everyone, and I mean everyone, frames the kids as this thing I should be honored to do. "They adore you, Amber," is often hurled at me between bites of apple pie like a throwaway line. It's true. They do adore me. Babies are love engines, and I'm powered by that, especially when they fall asleep on my chest and I can feel their tiny heart like a secret. That's the thing. Loving them is the easiest part. Loving does not entitle other adults to dump all responsibility onto you. So how did this become normal? 2 dynamics. My people-pleasing and the family's unconscious convenience. I am, by nature and training, the fixer. I organize, call, plan, and say yes because saying no feels like saying no to love. But say yes enough times, and people stop asking whether you mean it. They stop noticing the cost. And the family, they got comfortable. They adapted just as any organism does. When the organism benefits, it stops questioning. There are small betrayals that stack into something significant. Violet would promise to pick them up at 5 p.m., then ghost until 8 p.m., and when she finally showed up, she'd be smiling like she'd done me a favor. If I complained, she'd say, "You always overreact, Amber." My parents would mute into diplomacy. "She's stressed," they'd say. "We all are." Not all stress yields the same result. Her choices were predictable. My life derailed. I tried to document it in a way. I kept a mental ledger. Exams missed, shifts lost, nights I canceled on friends. 1 month, I tallied actual hours spent taking care of the twins. 48. That's 2 weeks of full-time work. I did the math out loud and got silence. The quiet was worse than anger. It felt like a verdict. But here's the cruelest twist. Because I'm still at home, my family assumes I'm available. Availability is the silent contract no one signed. It's implied by my address, by the box of textbooks in my bedroom, by the fact I can fold tiny socks between lecture notes. I internalized the role until it stopped feeling like an imposition and started feeling like my identity. Amber the responsible. Amber keeps things together. Nice sound bites that suffocate. So I reached a mental breaking point last semester. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no glass shattering, just a slow, accumulating burnout that made my reactions thinner and my patience a memory. One night after a 14-hour day, class, tutoring, babysitting until midnight because Violet had an important client meeting, I stood in my room and felt a kind of awful clarity. I could continue being the default and trade away my future in small installments, or I could stop. The thing about stopping is it sounds simple in a soliloquy and terrifying in practice. Say no one time and test the family's reflexes. Do they adapt, or do they implode? More precisely, do they respect my boundaries, or do they find new ways to reroute their inconvenience onto me? This clarity didn't bloom into a manifesto. It started as a whisper. I deserve to plan my life. I deserve to make choices without being undermined by familial inertia. I deserve respite that isn't scheduled around someone else's emergency. I deserve to go to Hawaii one summer without babysitting 2 toddlers the entire time. There's a sentence, small, ordinary, and it felt radical to think it. I tried small change first. I wrote out a schedule and sent it to Violet and my parents. I can help with babysitting on Tuesdays and Saturdays between 3 to 8 p.m. Outside of that, I'm unavailable. I used precise language because I thought clarity would be respected. I put it in an email so there would be a record. I even offered suggestions for paid sitters to help her budget. The reply came back in a text bubble. That's unfair. You live here. You're lucky we let you. You're always asking for things. There's an art to being gaslit by family. It is subtle and slow, and it turns your earnest spreadsheets into signs of selfishness. I tried again, more forcefully. I told my mother in person that I felt used, and that the arrangement was hurting my GPA and job. Her face tightened like fabric. We're all tired, Amber. We all make sacrifices. It's a comforting phrase if you want to keep people in their lanes. By the end of the semester, the stakes were clear. Either I accept the role of unpaid caretaker and watch my future erode, or I force a change, which might break the family's current harmony, and I'm not naive enough to think they wouldn't be angry. But anger felt less terrifying than a life of deferred dreams. So I began to plan borders I'd never enforced before. I started saving small amounts from my shifts into a move-out jar. I made friends who could vouch for me when I needed cover. I said no once in a small voice when Violet asked me to watch the twins on a Friday so she could have a drink with friends. And then I clung to that no like it was a lifeline. The reaction was immediate. Guilt, followed by a torrent of texts about how ungrateful I was, followed by my mother calling me to ask if I'd reconsider. The family dynamic held in place like gravity, discomfort but no collapse. That's where I am now, exhausted, resentful, and starting to practice a new verb, boundary. I'm still the person who organizes, who notices, who loves the little people with the ridiculous gummy smiles. I'm also someone who can see what's happening to her life and doesn't want to wake up 10 years from now surprised that she let herself become invisible. If this reads like I'm building toward something, you're right. I've started setting limits. I'm keeping receipts of missed events. I'm practicing saying no in the mirror. I'm planning a summer trip to Hawaii with a friend's family in their vacation house. That last sentence sounds small and ordinary, and for me, it feels like reclaiming oxygen. My intent for the trip is simple: to be allowed to be a friend on vacation, not a walk-in daycare. We were 3 days from the flight, and the house smelled like overpacked suitcases and sunscreen promise. I told everyone, out loud, like a spell, that I was going to Hawaii with Maya's family, and I would not be the twins' default babysitter the whole trip. I typed it into a family group chat and then said it at breakfast so there could be no mistaking the sentence. Violet called that afternoon, all warm voice and soft urgency, trying a trick she'd used before, wrote me into a promise. You'll take them for an afternoon while we sort childcare, right? You always help. The tone assumed the answer. The subtext was 1,000 unpaid hours folded into a single casual ask. I felt the old reflex, answer yes, be useful, pull at my ribs. My hands tightened around my mug. This felt like a test. Say yes, and the trip evaporates into diapers and nap schedules. Say no, and family drama blooms. I said no. No was a small, exact thing. I can't, I said. I'm going away to be with friends. I'll help plan, but I won't be the sitter. My voice didn't wobble. Saying it out loud made it real in a way text never did. There was a beat. Then my mother stepped in on the phone, her voice low but unmistakable. Amber's right. We'll look after them while you're gone. My father, somewhere in the background, added, We're their grandparents. Amber is a student with limits. We won't offload this onto her. For the first time in years, the family's default setting had been flipped. It wasn't theatrical revenge or a cliffside confrontation. It was a practical redistribution of labor, officiated by the adults who should have been doing it from the start. That night, I packed my suitcase with a little extra weight, a notebook whose first page simply said, boundaries. Standing my ground hadn't felt noble. It felt necessary. The trip still promised ocean and sleep and unhurried conversation, but what mattered most was smaller and sharper. Permission. Saying no had not broken the family. It had rebalanced it, at least for now.